Hey founders, welcome to the No Nerds, No Problem podcast. This week we have on Lea Marolt Sonneschein, founder and CEO at Jrny. We're going to talk about how she built her MVP using off-the-shelf, no-code components, as well as the step-by-step process she used to validate her offer with real customers. This was a great episode. It's a wonderful example of the process all non-technical founders should use. I had a blast, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to No Nerds, No Problem. Today, we have a very special guest. Lea, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Lea and I actually started talking as a prospective client relationship, and her story was so cool, and what she showed me was so awesome. I was like, all right, we'll talk about doing something together later. Let's get you on the show. Let's share your story. And I just told her this, but when I'm having calls with other prospective clients, I keep referencing what Lea told me about Jrny. So I'm super excited to have you on the show. Again, welcome. The other thing too is we've been trying to do this for a few weeks. So I'm actually worried that now that we're doing it, the world's going to end. So if the world starts ending, that's our fault. We did that by actually finally getting this together. So Lea, welcome again. Tell me a little bit about you, first of all, and then let's talk about Jrny.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start off, say, hi, my name's Lea. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Jrny, and Jrny is a personal career coach that lives on Slack. I am originally from Slovenia. I spent most of my adult life in the US. I went to college to Grinnell in Iowa, and then I spent some of my first working years in New York, working for a company called Venture the Runway. First as an iOS engineer, and then moved to product. And then I felt I wanted to be a little bit closer to home, so I moved to London to do a master's in a funky course called Innovation Design Engineering, where I got this patent for a mouth wearable that you actuate with your tongue. And yeah, now I decided to go the startup route. Since I've worked mostly at startups all my life, I was like, let's see if we can get something done. And it was very much based in my own personal experience with careers. I had been kind of mentoring people for interviewing and how to manage relationships. So I was doing a lot of stuff like helping peers and other people with their careers already. But I was having my own personal struggles as well. And I think that's often the case where you can give a lot of good advice to people, but it's hard for you to follow it. And yeah, when I was transitioning from an iOS engineer to a product manager, I didn't really have the right support from my company. So I ended up feeling a lot of anxiety, imposter syndrome, burnout, lots of self-inflicted stuff. And yeah, I kind of lost confidence in my own abilities to perform. So after a while, I decided to get a career coach. Spent a couple of months searching for one online because it's a very fragmented business, and it's really hard to find like who's quality and having lots of like intro calls and things like that. But ultimately, I found this awesome lady called Lindsay. She's from San Francisco, and we spent 3 months together doing a coaching program. And yeah, by the end, I felt very clear on what I wanted to do, confident in my own abilities, and kind of ready to make decisions that felt right for me. And I thought it was so powerful that, more people should basically have access to it. But it cost me $4,000. So that's not really a price most people can afford. So after that experience, I was like, how can we make this more affordable for more people? And one thing that Lindsay, my coach, said that stuck with me was, I wish I could clone myself because I'm a human. I only have 24 hours in a day. I can't do much more than I'm already doing. And it's like, fair enough. So how can we package what you're doing and even enhance it by knowing what other great coaches are doing and try to turn it into technology to help people? Yeah.
Really cool. I love it. I love anything that comes from a personal need first, right? Like you feel this pain. And then I love too that you combined your personal experience as a customer, right? And then went and talked to someone who's kind of on the other side of the domain expertise, right? Like your coach that you had experience with also got feedback there. how did you take that feedback, and what was the initial step from there to actually getting started? Like, what was the first thing you did on Jrny?
Yeah, so at that point, there was no Jrny. I didn't know what was going to be called or anything like that. It was just an idea of like, okay, how can we get the feeling or like the state that I got to at the end to more people? So as a product manager, my first inclination was like, all right, so I'm feeling this. I know that people in my network are kind of feeling this, especially at startups where there's a lot of confusion about career paths and how to grow and managers not having time, etc. But I wanted to see, does this problem happen in a broader scale that's not just in my network? So I spent about a month like putting together surveys and posting them on different professional groups on Slack, on Facebook, getting people to share it on LinkedIn, just like anything basically that could get me some more data outside of my personal network. So I had this one survey that was super long. It would take someone 30 minutes to complete it. And I had 300 people complete that survey, which was incredible because people don't do that. Like, if the survey is more than 5 minutes, no. People don't complete it. But what I saw from that survey was really that people were not happy. People were not happy, not feeling fulfilled with their careers or the support they were getting from their companies or their managers. And even if they were managers themselves, you could see there was this like big mismatch in what managers thought that they needed to do and what their direct reports wanted them to do. So from that, it became very clear that this is a way more global problem than just my network. And especially, I think, on the back of, the pandemic and the global resignation, it's very clear that there is a need for some support that helps people navigate careers, especially because careers are changing, like the general like career ladder that our parents were used to, they don't really exist yet. And I read the statistic that in 2030, 85% of the careers that will exist then haven't even been invented yet. And that's just 8 years from now. So that's wild. And so how are we going to navigate that path, and how will someone else help us? Like, really, the ownership on how to navigate those careers should be on the individual. So spend a month like kind of doing these surveys and stuff. And then from those surveys, I started reaching out to people and doing tons of interviews. So I've interviewed like over 50 people during that time. Just kind of about their career in general, what went well, what didn't go well, top 3 things they would, go back to their 20-year-old self to tell them. And like the thing that kept on coming up from especially more senior people was like, I did coaching, or I did this thing where I changed my mindset from a fixed one to a growth one. And the only thing I really wish was that I could get there earlier. Right. As well as with younger people, what just came up is that, you just don't know what you don't know, and they're feeling confused, and like their goals are to make an impact, like these big, broad goals, but not more tangible things that they can actually achieve. So that's where the tension comes through. So what coaching helped me do a lot is really like pick at those goals and pick and say like, okay, what does that mean for me? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What would that be in a year's time or something like that? So that's kind of how things started. Then I ended up entering this accelerator program here in the UK called Antler, which was marketed as a pre-idea accelerator. So the idea is you go there and you're supposed to find a co-founder there. So I went there with this like broad idea. They really encourage you not to be too stuck on the idea, but to be more stuck on like, the team dynamics of a person. So I partnered up with some people in this similar area, and we explored it from a lot of different ways. Because this like problem, I guess, of clarity, confidence, etc., navigating your career, there are a lot of different points in your life where it could be attacked. So the first one was let's think about how that would look like if we interjected at high school, because we also knew that at college, people were freaking out when they were graduating and saying, like, I don't know what to do. What job do I go into? Where do I apply? Blah, blah, blah. So, like, at that point, they're feeling the frustration of, how do I get a job? What do I actually want? So we're like, well, if we introduce lots of different careers to people at high school, they'll be able to pick better majors and maybe better careers longer term. We explored that for a little while, but honestly, what ends up happening is that the people who care about that in high school are parents, not the kids.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it makes it very hard to convince a kid to want to think about their career at that point in time. So after some exploration, interviewing, and, did some experiments with a few high schools here in the UK, we're like, all right, this is not working out. Then the next one was more around peer-to-peer mentoring. Like, how can you leverage people who have gone through like a similar career path that you might want to go into and coach you on that way? And that ultimately also didn't work out. Then I did a couple of other experiments where I was thinking about, like, maybe let's not go so globally, like all careers and all people. But let's try to focus on one path. So because I was product manager and had a network in that, I was like, let's try to do some cohorts with product managers. And I actually put together a couple of groups of 5 people. I got someone to facilitate the groups. We went through this like problem-solving framework for PMs who are like 3 years into their career or something like that. And it was actually pretty good, and all the people really enjoyed it. They said that they learned a lot from it. I think especially because in product you have this thing where every company does product differently. So being able to go outside of your bubble to learn like processes and playbooks from someone else is super impactful. It's like, oh, I haven't thought about doing it this way. So it was really useful for everyone, but no one wanted to pay. So we got to that problem. I was like, well, this was fun, but it would be a lot and I don't see like the potential for moving this forward really. And I couldn't see like really how to scale that very easily. And then you already had companies like Beyond Deck and Reforward and things like that that are creating these like crazy like community-based programs and have a ton of backing in terms of funding and huge teams. And I was like, all right, maybe not now. So I went back to the drawing board of just coaching and back to the original idea, like, how can we make coaching a scalable thing? And I had spent a lot of time in ed tech myself. So I had written a lot of tutorials and video courses for a company called Ray Vanderlick. They're like the #1 site for mobile tutorials.
I've used a bunch when I was younger.
Nice. So I've been with them for about 6 years now, I think.
So funny,
doing lots of different things from books, videos, tutorials, and
for those since there's a lot of non-technical people listening, Ray's site is kind of like one of the go-to tutorials for iOS development, and now mobile generally. But I think it was iOS to start, and I mean he was. Even way back, like, was one of the first, I think, that was just so dedicated on talking about that. So that's funny. I've definitely consumed some of your content probably at some point.
Yeah, exactly. And like, even if you Google anything like iOS tutorial, like that's going to come up as like one of the first Google results.
Yeah, always.
Yeah. So I had a lot of knowledge of how to like structure educational content. And so I was like, how could we combine like the coaching experience I went through with some of like the ed tech principles of teaching people and reiterating knowledge and things like that? Ended up reading a ton of books on coaching, took the program that kind of Lindsay and I went through, and basically started putting together a course essentially to take people who had a similar experience that I had, and then added a bunch of stuff in to make it more interactive. And the one thing that was really important to me was coaching was very painful. And what I mean is like doing self-reflection and going deep into yourself. It takes a lot of energy. And I would like spend a whole day or 2 days on that, like those exercises. And I was like, if I wasn't paying $4,000 for this, I probably would quit. So my goal was really to make it like bite-sized and able to like to break it down into like simple steps, but they would still get to a good level of self-reflection over a longer period of time to kind of also give you more time to do that self-reflection and ruminate on the different ideas that we were discussing. So yeah, I put together this program, and then naturally because of my mobile app experience, I went into, it's going to be an app. And I went straight into designing the app, and had this beautiful app and prototyped it, had a demo video of it that was getting into our deck, and people were like, oh, that looks so cool. And then I was ready to start building it. And I thought to myself, probably better than start building this because it's going to take a while. You should test the content. You should test the content of what you wrote here in this course, essentially. So how can you do that in the fastest way, the cheapest way? And so I thought, let's try to use Slack, because Slack is where people work. So it should be easy to get them to access. It would be easy for me to access these users. And if they need any help, they could ask me immediately. And so the idea was born like, let's test the content out on Slack first, and then we'll move to mobile later once we know that the content is good and we've iterated on it. And, I reached out to a whole bunch of the people that I interviewed or surveyed, and about 30 or 40 of them replied. So yeah, reached out to about 40 people, decided to take on 10 who were kind of in the target demographic. So 10 years into their career, and kind of struggling with their careers at the time, and working at smaller companies where there was a lot of confusion. So yeah. And then I looked into how to build a Slack bot. It seemed tricky and it would take a lot of time. So instead of building a Slack bot, I decided, I'll just be the bot. Because the point was to test the content, not, the tech. And so what that meant is that I scheduled 15-minute invites with all of these people at a certain time, at which time the bot would message them, the bot, me. And I would just message them these like pre-scripted things that I put together for the course, and see if they would reply. And doing so, I made a terrible mistake because I thought it would be a cool idea to get people from all over the world to get a good sample, right? And so what that meant in practice was that they scheduled their time like throughout the day from 2 a.m. to 10 p.m. Yep. And so what that meant is that for 3 months after that, I was literally like up until at least 10 p.m. like messaging these people and waking up at 2 a.m. to message this other person. And then I also had to be there when they responded to like, give them the next message. So it got very awkward because when I was at like friends and families and dinners and events, I'd be like, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have my phone here on loud because I'm a bot and I need to respond to people when they message me. I'm not trying to be rude, I promise. Yeah, so it was a very intense period of time doing that. But it was super, super helpful because I could see that people were first of all, that Slack was so much better at getting people to engage versus mobile apps, because I had spent a lot of time with mobile apps before, and I know that notifications just don't work that well. But on Slack, they do. And people respond. And it's easy because it's just there all the time. They're on the computer. And typing on a phone is also not that fun. And some of the stuff that we have them do, like we try to be more interactive than just question answer. But there are some questions and answers, and some people write a lot. So it's a lot easier to actually do it on a computer. At the same time, they could also do it on their phone because Slack already has an app. So it was a really, really good choice to start off with that. And originally, it was just going to be this Slack conversation bot thing. And then I realized over time, it's very hard to find things in Slack and go back and forth in what you're doing. And I wanted to add some more interactivity to what we were doing because I was kind of writing the course as we went along. I wrote about like half of it to start off with. And then I was like, I'm going to have to change it as people are going through it and then seeing how they like it. Because I did these like feedback sessions after they completed each module. So we had like 7 modules that we wanted to do. And so I was like, okay, how can we emulate this experience of writing in a table or sorting cards or giving them like a nice overview of all of their responses so they can look back on it without having to scroll through the Slack messages. And that's where the idea for including Notion came in because Notion is, quite a cool platform where you can basically make a website that's interactive, that's something that you can add on to, add comments, like use it as your own, and then users could have something to walk away with to look back on at all times. So at that point, once I saw that people were engaging, I was like, all right, let's try to include Notion to add some more interactivity and this like memorabilia for them to look back on and add some additional insights as they were going through. So I was really running the whole spiel on Slack, Notion, and I added in some Typeform as well for some quizzes.
Awesome.
So just like all of these like third-party tools to simulate this experience that I had in mind that was very beautiful and amazing. But yeah, it worked. We started off with 15 people in mid-November. By January, we had 13 left. So even though it was, all glued together with these third-party tools, it seems to have worked.
Yeah, you had stickiness. And you know what? No one cared, right? No one cared that it wasn't like Journey's app. No one cared that they were going between Slack and Notion. Like people do that all day, right? Like to your point of meet people where they are. People are on Slack. You know what they do on Slack? They get messages with links in them and they click those links and they go to places, right? Like
exactly.
Or you could have spent, like you said you were thinking of, you could have spent probably months building an app and luckily you could build the app, or you could have spent months and $100,000 building the app. It wouldn't have been better. It would have distracted you from something else. You wouldn't have been able to do this other thing with your time. I love your story because there's so many times when there's like a cliff that you're like not like speeding towards, but there's a cliff like nearby, and you go look at the cliff, and you're like, no, I'm not gonna jump off that cliff, right?
Not yet. I don't have my
not yet. But no, I love it. Like, so you start with this huge demo, and then you're like, all right, so just careers, right? We have to fix careers, and it's like, okay, maybe not all careers, right? Like, let's zoom back in. Then you have the high school kids, and this is like a classic mistake that you caught yourself making, but some people don't catch themselves making, which is sometimes the person paying is not the person that you are talking to, right? And that's like a huge hurdle. One of the things that Slack did to overcome that was you didn't have to go get buy-in from your boss. You could just create a Slack account with you and your 3 team members and check it out. Then once this had critical mass, now you're going to go talk to that stakeholder. But you didn't have to get your stakeholder to put the credit card on and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you have this huge target demo. You go to the high school. That's not going to work. You go back. Now you're making it specific, but you're still feeling things out. So like you miss that cliff, right? Of like, oh, we're going to do everything everywhere. Because that's a cliff that people jump off all the time. Then you're like, all right, cool. I know what I want to do. I'm pretty dialed in. I'm going to build content and build an app and go launch. And you're like, no, wait. That's another cliff. Like I don't want to jump off. We don't need to build this app. We can put this together, other tools. I'm going to have to do like a bigger recap after this because I have this whole thing of notes of like all these little points where like you could have made a mistake that lots of people make. And you were like, let's pull back and like reassess, realign.
Yeah. And I think for me, what's really important, like as a human being, for me, it's really important to have other people around me that are kind of working with me, or I like see that something is working for them. So that was another thing why I kept on going with this Slack thing, because I would have these feedback sessions with users like once a week or once every 2 weeks or so. And that kept the momentum going, because I was like, okay, cool. So you're enjoying this. It's helping you. Great. All right, let's keep on going. Right. And I think if I had thrown myself into technology without like any user input, I would probably have lost the momentum, because it would have taken me like 3 months or something to get something out there that's kind of okay. And with this, just because I like threw myself into let's have users immediately, let's start doing stuff, it just kept the momentum going. Because another thing I haven't mentioned is that I originally had a co-founder, and she left and she was going to be the CEO, and I was going to be the CPO. I didn't want to be a CEO. And she left in January, but at that point, and we split amicably, so it was all good. But at that point, I was like, I could stop now, but I had all these users. So I was like, well, let's just see it through, right? Let's see what happens. And at that point as well, like in January, we got 2 companies on board, just 3 people from 2 companies, and one actually committed to paying, because everyone was telling me like, you need to get people to pay, and I was like, all right, let's give it a go. And I was like, how about you pay this much? And it was such a tiny amount. It was like £6 per person, so 18 pounds in total, so really nothing. But it was just that like feeling like, get someone to pay something. And we got them to pay, and I was like, oh my god, we got someone to pay, and they're using it, and they're going through it. And that kind of emboldened me to try another experiment in February. And I was like, what would happen if I put $100 like behind a LinkedIn ad? So I did a LinkedIn ad and ended up actually getting 45 people to sign up through that. I don't know if it was just the ad or me sharing the ad with my network, but we got quite a lot of signups from that. Selected 10 people to join out of that. And then the way we did it was like, hey, you get a module for free out of the 7. And then you can start paying on a monthly basis of £19 a month. All right. So we raised the price significantly. And we actually had 5 people convert, and they're still with us.
100, so you broke even in the first month off of that ad.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, cool. So each month I try to do something to like push us a little bit further. So first we had the 15 individual users, then we got the companies, then we got the paying subscribers. And then I was like, you know what? Okay, now it's time to build the tech. So since March, we have been building the tech, we have been building the bot, and we are actually ready to launch in 2 weeks from now on May 2nd. We are getting our like inaugural class or cohort of 100 people onto the actual bot. So yeah, we've been testing like crazy for the past couple of weeks. But when I look back on the experience that the 15 first people went through and I compare it to what it is now, I'm just shocked that they had gone through that, like really not a great experience at all. And now it's like very polished. There's buttons. Before there were no buttons. And like there's selectors, and there's it's good. It's beautiful. People really like it. They're like, oh, it's so smooth. It's so blah blah. I'm like, yeah.
But if even when it wasn't, that's how you knew you were onto something of value, right? Because if you're on a real pain point and you're solving it, even if you're solving it poorly or ugly, sure, that works. Even if you suck at solving it, but if you're the only person who's really talking about that pain point, then people are going to come and they're going to work with you. Like, you don't need the perfect, pretty solution.
You don't. And like, I think that's the key point here. Like, if someone is willing to engage with the shitty version of your solution, like, then that means that, okay, it is worth it to build out something. If they're not willing to do that, then maybe find a better way to figure it out. But that was the reason why we decided to then build out the tech. because we did that first pilot, we did the second pilot, we did the third pilot, and we kept on having people, like some people dropped off and some people weren't engaging like all the time, but the majority was with us, and kept on going and kept on, giving us really positive feedback, actually started referring people to us. So we're like, all right, we're definitely onto something.
It's funny because your background as a technical person, now the cliff analogy, right? Like you could have gone off the cliff of like, I'm just going to build it. You lost momentum. You wouldn't have been able to test all these things. But what's really funny to me when I talk to a lot of non-technical people is they're actually the ones that get the most caught up on this. It has to be an app. It has to be perfect. It has to, and it's like, no, like you can accomplish things with Slack, Notion, Typeform, Airtable, right? Like there's so many great things. And then guess what? Yeah. When you've proven and you've even built a little bit of an audience, you have some money coming in, even if it's $10 a month.
Yeah.
Now you say, okay, cool. Now if I build the tech, it'll just make this better.
Exactly. And not make me have to spend all of my days like being a Slack bot. So that was really the most important part why we needed to build the tech, because I was spending a few hours a day just messaging people. So what I ended up doing actually for in February and March, I actually hired someone on Upwork to help me and take care of half of the people, because I just couldn't cope with everything else that I was also doing at the time. But yeah.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to scale, right? Like scale isn't always a tech problem, right? Sometimes scale is a hands problem. You just need more hands.
For sure, yeah. And I think with Upwork, the nice thing is that, we got a girl from Serbia. We pay her, I think, $10 an hour, which is not a good salary in the US, but it's a great salary in Serbia. Because they make like $3 an hour on average. So you feel pretty good about it. I feel good about it. So, yeah.
Well, and the thing I always say too, like I have friends who are probably going to be mad that I'm calling them out again, because I call them out often. But you can pay $200 an hour for a software engineer in Brooklyn, which is great. You're essentially paying someone's Brooklyn rent and for like $6 coffees at a trendy Brooklyn cafe. Or you could take that $200 and you could get 5 at least, maybe more engineers in a non-American country who are, first of all, probably better because they're not entitled Brooklyn engineers that stayed up last night at a rave because it was Tuesday night and they live in Brooklyn. They are just as good. They're probably harder working. They're less entitled. And again, that $200, my friends in Brooklyn, they're just going to go take all that money. And again, they don't care. It's like, it's $200. It's like they want $250. They think they deserve $250. Yep. That engineer in Ukraine or in Latin America, Southeast Asia, if you pay them $25 an hour, that is a life-changing amount of money for them, like life-changing.
Yep.
So that's something I always tell people too, is like, do you want to be paying for someone else's coffee in Brooklyn, or do you want to be paying so that someone can support their grandparents in Bangladesh?
Yeah, definitely. Like I started my career in the US and had a US salary. I was in New York. I was in Manhattan getting that, engineering salary for Brooklyn, Manhattan, whatever. And then I actually spent some time working for a Slovenian company when I was doing my master's, more for fun than anything else because it was like a cool product. But I had experience working with engineers in the US and I had experience working with engineers in Slovenia. And I'm like, you are like, the Slovenian ones are like, you are very efficient and extremely professional and very good. And I maybe even better than the people I've worked with previously. Like, I was very impressed with how the quality of the work essentially that was being produced at like the same or slightly higher level than it was at the company I worked at before. So yeah.
They're far less divas. There are far fewer divas in international freelancing. Like before No Nerds, now we have our in-house team, but before No Nerds, I would put together teams on the spot. So it was like, all right, this is a mobile project. I'm going to go find 2 iOS engineers and we've got a Ruby backend. So I got to find that. And I would go, kind of put together freelancers from TopTal and Upwork or just people I'd worked with before. And occasionally I would run out of options, or I'd kind of exhaust my network internationally. And I'd be like, all right, I'm going to look in the US, or the client was adamant about being US. And every time the difference between like the folks who are out of the US and then like the people who are in the US, it's like they would disappear for days, and then they would have some excuse. They'd always be blaming the problems on external systems, on whatever. And it was just like the other engineers. I had an engineer in Poland one time who like didn't receive the full spec, so they built 3 different things just in case. And it's like, what? What?
Yeah, versus someone would have been like, excuse me, you didn't specify everything, so I couldn't even start work.
Yeah, and I didn't tell you for 3 days because I've been at Burning Man, so.
Yeah. I feel.
Yeah. So now that you've got the tech in process, you're launching, you said May.
Yeah, May 2nd. So
May 2nd.
A week and a few days from now.
Yeah, that's super exciting. What's next?
Next is really just monitor how people are doing with the product. We've been QAing it, but it's a really hard thing to QA, I have to say. Chatbots, like, so hard, especially ours, because it's like a daily thing. So it's really hard to QA. So that's going to be like on high alert, like, how are people doing? Are they using it? How are they using it? It's something wrong. Next steps is just raise money.
Cool.
So we'll be going into our pre-seed raise soon after that. Because we'll have proven like a decent amount of traction. We'll have some retention engagement numbers from the 100 people. The tech will be like pretty solidly in place, and we'll be ready to kind of scale the team, try to figure out like product market fit. We're already kind of making some partnerships with companies that could co-develop with us, because like ultimately this is a B2B product where we're going for more of a bottoms up growth. So like similar to Slack, you can get it as an employee, but then the employer should be the one paying for it. So we need to figure out what it would look like on the other side of the table, so that for an employer, what kind of things we can show them to prove the ROI of what like people are going through essentially. So those are the next like immediate steps.
Beautiful. Well, when you guys get done fundraising, we need to have you back on, because people are always asking questions about that. I love, though, that it hasn't really been a thought until now that you've got, like you said, you've got some traction, you have a product. It's maybe not the full grandiose vision that you would like, but you are selling. Yeah. And now you can go, and that story when you walk into that VC room is going to be so different than if you had tried to go a year ago. Now you're like, this is this. Here are the users who are paying money. Here's the receipts that I receive when their credit card payments go through. Like, you can argue things with me about growth, but you cannot argue that this is a product that is needed, right?
Yeah, it is a product that people are paying money for.
Yeah, exactly.
So, there we go. Yeah, exactly that. And I think what prevented me from trying to raise money earlier, and I had some initial conversations with VCs, and we have a deck, and we've kind of like sent out a deck before, but we weren't seriously raising. It was more just for informational, here's what we're doing, let's have a chat. And really it was to kind of collect information and get some warm intros, so that once we are at this stage when we do want to fundraise, we can be like, all right, here are the 20 people we already talked to. Let's try to get them again in 1 week and get this over with quickly. But yeah, a lot of people, accelerators, friends, other founders kind of warned me against, don't try to raise too soon. Because you'll just drag on the fundraising process and you won't be able to focus on the product, because this is going to take up all of your time. And so I was like trying to be very intentional to, this is not the time when we fundraise. When we fundraise, I need to be 100% on that.
Mm-hmm.
So that also means that I need to have the tech built so that the product can keep on going
Right.
by the time we do the fundraise. Yeah.
We had a conversation a couple weeks ago with a member at a VC firm talking about early stage raising, especially for non-technical founders. And it's interesting because we talk about in product all the time, take something, go talk to people. It doesn't have to be done. It just like start those conversations. Because if you are working alongside someone for a year and then you finally unlock the product, that person's definitely going to buy it because they've been watching your progress. You have been building it for them, essentially.
For sure.
What came up in the VC conversation, and it sounds like this is advice that's been given to you too, is you should do that with VCs too, in that it's never too early to say hello. It's too early to fundraise. It's definitely don't like call the VC up and be like, let me pitch you on this cool idea I have. That's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
But if you are opening these conversations and you're spending a year and you're like, hey, just, giving you guys a heads up, we just launched, like, check it out. Let me know what you think. And then now you come, you've got the receipts, you've got the user roles, you've got all this stuff. And you go, hey, by the way, now we're raising. That is so much stronger than this myth of, oh, I'm going to prepare the perfect deck. I'm just going to show up unannounced at Sand Hill. I'm going to walk into this boardroom. I'm going to smack my deck on the table and they're going to give me millions of dollars. Like, no, it's all relationships still. Like, get out there, make the introductions and start building those friendships.
Definitely. Well, yes, I agree with you, but I can't say that it has worked because I haven't gotten to that point. But one thing that I have been doing, though, is like with each conversation, really, you kind of want to end it like, hey, do you want to, hear back from us? Like, do you want to be updated on what we're doing? And then I've just been sending these like monthly newsletters, updates on how we're doing. Like, what are the wins? What are the challenges? What they can help with? And what are the plans for like next month? So that's been pretty useful to keep people updated and see that you're, on having momentum and that things are happening. So those have been pretty useful to kind of keep people engaged on a regular basis, but not annoying.
Yeah, staying in contact is so important. It's just being front of mind, right? Whether that's with your users, potential customers, potential partners, or potential investors. Like, just remind them that you're alive, right?
Exactly.
Awesome, Lea. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. Again, I'm going to have to record like a recap thing afterwards with all the things that I wanted to comment on during your story. Before we go, I always like to ask one more question. Is there anything that we didn't talk about? Any advice you have, especially for non-technical founders? And, I know you're technical, but you've treated this like a non-technical founder, which is what's so fascinating about the story. Any advice, anything I didn't touch on that we should have?
That's an interesting question. I guess, I think the most important thing we talked about, which is don't try to build the tech first.
Right.
Like, try to figure out any other way that you can provide the value you want to provide to users without building anything. But then I think the other thing that is really tricky for non-technical founders, especially if they don't have a technical co-founder, is how do they find that technical person? And it worked out for me in a weird way. Like, my technical co-founder, I didn't know him before, even though I had like a huge network of engineers. But I would say start talking to people who are technical early and asking for advice. And then that could lead to then someone wanting to be your CTO, for example. And then another thing that I just remembered. If I've been trying to do a lot of onboarding calls for people and companies and whatever, to check out Jrny, be our users, etc. And what I found that works the best is not saying hey, I have this great product for you to check out. I think you'd be a great fit, blah, blah, blah. What works out really well is hey, I'm Lea. I'm the founder of Jrny. We're developing this product and I'm just trying to do some user research and an interview. Do you have time for a 15-minute call to just like, tell me your thoughts on what we're building. And that works super well. Like, trying to sell people doesn't work, but if you're asking people for advice, that works really well. And actually, at this point, like, going direct to people is a lot better and more powerful than trying to, like, blast ads to nowhere. Because, like, ads, I tried ads, and I tried the LinkedIn ad, which worked out really well. But I tried, like, Instagram ads. They failed completely. And it's because it takes time for the algorithms to learn what you're actually trying to do, who's the target audience. You have to be posting all the time. Like, you don't have time to do that. Honestly, like, spending the time to find, like, 100 people to reach out to on LinkedIn or email or something like that, and then email them personally, or, like, set up a HubSpot or whatever, that will give you so much more than trying to blast ads and spend money on that. And then going to them directly, because as soon as they start talking to you, they're invested because they know you, they like you, you're, you know, like, super enthusiastic about the thing, they're agreeing with the problem points, and they become your advocates if you do that. And you want to, like, with your early users, you want to make that connection. You want to have them be your supporters. So, like, when you launch on Product Hunt, you'd be like, hey, can you upvote this for us? If you have 100 people who will love you, 100 upvotes, yay. Rather than, like, a bunch of people that you don't know. So yeah, that's, like, go direct to people.
Go direct to people.
And ask for advice.
And ask for advice. It's people want to be helpful. And if you ask someone for help, they want to help you. Now, there's a limit to that, right? Don't go just pull everyone's time. But like you said, you had this survey that was 30 minutes long, and you were like, no one's gonna do this. But you were touching on a problem, and you were asking for help, and so people were like, yeah, I want to, like, and also, I think you're going to help me because I'm answering the survey. These are problems, and people like to talk about their problems. People like to
exactly.
People like to complain. So, like, hey,
people love talking about themselves.
That too, right? So it's like, hey, I've noticed people like you are experiencing this problem. Are you experiencing it? You are. Tell me about it, right? And then people are going to vent. They're going to offer their advice. If you are helpful in return, they are now interested in purchasing things from you in the future, right? Because they're a fan of yours, they're an advocate. So always be helpful, ask for help. Those two things, people have this terrible opinion of sales because of car salesmen, Wolf of Wall Street type salespeople in movies, where it's this,
and all the terrible LinkedIn salespeople that message you and just do a horrible job at it. It's like, how are you so, like, terrible at your job? I don't understand. I also had a terrible opinion of sales, to be honest.
It's super normal, especially, if it's not your profession. I think you do have, like, you don't trust it, right? There's something untrustworthy about it. Exactly. But at the end of the day, it's just like, hey, people have problems. You might be able to solve those problems. If you go to those people and talk about their problems, which they're happy to do, again, they're happy to vent. That's a sale. That's all sales is. It's like, hey, I think you have a problem. This might be a solution. What do you think? Right?
Yeah, exactly. And
awesome,
like,
Lea.
Of all those calls that I've had with people who I reached out to that way, 95% of them then want to try out our product at the end of the call. So it's been very successful.
Yeah, it's a little of a Trojan horse, but as long as you're not, and you can always tell, because there are salespeople who do that too, but they're salespeople first, right? And so they wait until, like, the last 5 minutes, and they're like, hey, by the way, Lea, this wasn't actually a podcast. This has been me trying to pitch you on my sale the whole time, right? And that's not the point, right? It's like, hey, go get, and you're going to get value too, because you're going to have a conversation like this conversation. There's actually been 2 or 3 things for my own business, which is no relation to yours, but there's been 2 or 3 things you've been like, oh, the monthly newsletter we do to VCs, and it's like, oh shit, we should do that. But we need to do, like, just to previous clients, to whoever, like, that's such a good idea. That this conversation has been so valuable, and any conversation you're going to have with someone else is going to be valuable. If then at the end they go, hey, by the way, what do you guys do? Awesome. Great. If not, who cares? It's been a super valuable conversation. So
cool.
Awesome, Lea. Well, on that front, thank you again for coming. This has been super cool. As I said before, I was waiting to get this conversation, and it was exactly what I wanted. Like, there's so many cool little points in here. I think anybody who's interested in doing this, who's on that non-technical, especially if they're not technical, there's so many like, it's like a classic fairy tale, right? Like there's the warning and the moral message in there, right? Like there's a good story, but there's also like the hidden moral tale in there. So I loved it. Thank you so much for coming on. And again, we're going to get you back on in a few months when you're done with your fundraising round so you can give advice there too.
Thanks so much for having me, James. Yeah, this was great.
Of course. And for everyone listening, go check it out. It's May 2nd launch. What's your guys' website again?
It's jrny.space.
.space. Yes. jrny.space. jrny.space. Again, I reached out to Lea because I found them probably on AngelList originally, and loved like the materials you guys had out. Loved the way you talked about it. And so go check it out. It's super cool. Career stuff is something everyone needs help with. And Lea is a great technical acting, non-technical founder to learn from. So thanks again, Lea, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, James. This was great.